Welcome, everyone. So as you probably know already, this first seminar will be a free one, and we will talk about motivation in this one. Of course, a very, very important topic for all of you. And from next week on, it will be available only for essential and elite members. And in the second seminar, we will talk about confidence. In the third seminar, we will talk about mental preparation and dealing with adversity. And in the fourth seminar, we will talk about concentration. And I also decided to put out another essential video, which relates to sports psychology. It's not exactly sports psychology, but very closely related to it. And in this video, which will probably come out in 2 weeks, I want to talk about poker as a team sport. So I don't want to tell too much about it because I think it's something that I've never seen in any mental game videos so far, and I think seeing poker as a team sport is a great tool to improve your enjoyment of poker, your success, your performance, and also your longevity as a poker player. Turning away from this approach as a lone wolf who grinds alone his whole career, turning poker into more of a team sport. But before we get into the first topic, I want to quickly introduce myself very quickly. Most of you probably have seen at least a little bit of my content. My name is Jan Philippi. I'm a psychologist and Run It Once Essential Coach. And I have played professionally for about 10 years, off and on. Actually, recently, I started playing a little bit more again. Now for the rest of the year, I'm going to focus on coaching more again. And I have coached around or a little over 100 poker players by now. I do coach executives in companies as well, but my main focus is on coaching poker players. If you want to know more about me and my coaching, you can visit my website, janphilippi.com/poker. So much for the introduction. Before we get into the topic, I quickly want to know who you guys are. What kind of audience am I talking to? So I would like to do a quick survey and ask you, first of all, who here has seen at least one of my videos? I'm interested to see who has seen at least a little bit of my content already. All right, mostly first timers. That's pretty awesome to see. Almost everyone sees something from me for the first time, which is a great, always nice to see new people coming in. And then the second question I have for you guys, who of you is, one person has seen all my Run It Once video. That's awesome. Best mental videos on Rio, seen them all. Awesome. That's very nice to hear. Thank you. The second question I want to ask you guys is, who of you is a professional player or has very serious plans to turn professional? And who of you is a recreational player who plays poker just for fun or as a small side income? All right, awesome. A lot more pros than I expected, actually. So we have a pretty good mix of around 50% professionals and recreationals, and a few who are on their path to becoming professionals. Those are like my favorite clients, the ones who are not professional yet, but who want to turn professional because they are always super, super motivated. For them, of course, a coaching package is quite a big investment. And so it's often actually quite a big chunk of their bankroll, but they are so motivated and they are so aware of how important the mental game is that they're still willing to invest that money. And it's so much fun to work with those people because they have a very strong motivation and looking forward to basically quitting their boring 9-to-5 job and becoming a poker professional. It's always a lot of fun to work with those people. But so much for the introduction. Let's get into sports psychology. I want to quickly give you an overview of some general sports psychology related skills that you as a poker player can use to improve your performance as well. Pretty much everything in sports psychology can be applied to poker as well, or almost everything, because basically poker is a sport. And there's a tool called Athletic Coping Skills Inventory, which is basically a questionnaire where these 7 factors are being assessed. How good are you at coping with adversity? How good are you at performing under pressure? How good are you at setting goals and preparing mentally, for example, for competition or specifically for difficult situations? How good is your concentration? How much do you worry during performance, or how little do you worry about things? How strong is your confidence, and what type of motivation do you possess? We talk about that later today. And how coachable are you? And the studies that have been done with this ACSI show that overachievers score significantly higher in the total score of this inventory, and especially in coachability, concentration, and coping with adversity. And of course, normal achievers and underachievers, they score lower in this inventory. And if you've seen some of my videos, and if you continue to watch my videos in the future, you will see that pretty much all of these topics will be addressed in my videos, and of course in this seminar as well. And today, of course, will be mostly about motivation. If you ever watch soccer games, or I'm not sure, maybe it's a prevalent thing in other sports as well, but I recognize this again and again, especially in German soccer commentators, and it always tilts me like crazy, because you would assume sports commentators should know a little bit about motivation in sports, and apparently they don't. If a team loses, they often come up with this stupid, super oversimplifying sentence: they just didn't want it enough. Like they forgot to turn off the "I want it enough" button in the morning. And motivation is this super simple thing that you either have or don't have, that you can turn off, or like, yeah, you either want it or you don't want it. As if motivation was this simple construct, and it would come down to this one thing: either you want it or you don't. And that is, of course, just not true. In reality, motivation is a very complex thing resulting from personal and situational factors. And right now, I want to show you a few models that help you understand motivation better, and therefore, of course, also find ways to improve your own motivation, to make your motivation more stable, more plannable, more controllable. Because it's not that random thing that you either have or you don't, or that you can turn off and on whenever you want, or that is uncontrollable or unplannable. If you understand how motivation works, you can massively improve your motivation. So yeah, motivation is a complex construct created through a participant, a person, and a situation interaction. For example, there's personal factors like your personality, your needs, your interests, your goals. We'll get into those in detail in a minute. But there's also, of course, situational factors, like what kind of coach do you have? What kind of team do you have around you? How do the people around you talk to you about your motivation or your performance? How does your coach coach you? Do you even have a coach? Do you even have people around you? Then what kind of environment are you grinding in? Are you living in this dirty basement apartment where everything is messed up, and I don't know, your living your living conditions aren't great? Or do you live in a house surrounded by motivated other poker players, and the sun is shining in, and you have a great view over a lake, and so on? And of course, factors like, if you translate it from sports psychology to poker, the team's win-loss record would be something like, how well are you doing at the moment? Are you running well? Are you running poorly? Are you on top of your game, or are you playing your C game? So yeah, of course, motivation is created by both personal factors and situational factors. Maybe some of you have heard of the self-determination theory, which is not exactly from sports psychology, but is it's from general psychology, but is being applied in sports psychology as well. And it basically says there's 3 important factors that determine how motivated we are. For one, there's autonomy. The feeling that you have a choice of how to approach a problem or a challenge. For example, if you're stuck in a job where everything you do is predetermined, if your boss tells you exactly what you do and you have absolutely no freedom of choice, you just have to follow the same exact steps again and again, your feeling of autonomy will be very, very limited or non-existent. That, of course, is very bad for motivation. And that's actually one of the biggest reasons why people turn professional poker players, because they want that freedom, they want that autonomy. In poker, in theory at least, you have a lot of freedom. You can design your lifestyle your own way. You can exactly choose when you get up in the morning. You can choose which games to play. You can choose which format to play. You can choose how many hours you want to play, how many hours you want to study. You can take a day off whenever you like, at least in theory, of course. Many poker players, they restrict their own freedom. They restrict their own autonomy by imposing self-made rules on them, or by being too focused on certain things, feeling like they have to grind all the time. For example, a very common example would be if there's a big fish at the table. People feel like they absolutely have to play, and they don't have that feeling of freedom anymore. If the games are good, I have to play. So people end up actually restricting their own freedom. But ideally and theoretically, poker is a great job to feel a lot of autonomy. Then we have competence. The feeling of being good at something, the feeling of mastering an art or a craft or a skill, which again, of course, if your work is either way too hard or way too easy, you don't have that feeling of competence. Either you feel like you're incompetent, you're not good enough because the task is way too difficult, or you're feeling under challenged and you feel like the task is so easy that no skill is required, which will also, of course, be bad for motivation. Ideally, you want a challenging task that is doable. And relatedness, the need to feel connected or a feeling of belonging to others, which of course can be other poker players, which is, I think, something that is very much underutilized in the poker community, the possibility to connect with other people through poker, building a strong peer group, more than just people that you chat on Discord with and talk about hands only, but actually building friendships, building business partnerships, and so on. Because, yeah, it's common sense. If you're surrounded by, let's say, 5 other people who play similar games as you are on a similar skill level, have similar interests, and you get along well with each other, your motivation to work together, improve together, your ability to deal with downswings, your ability to deal with difficult situations will be much, much higher than when you're doing it all alone. So this is the self-determination theory. But there's more theories to come. There's also the need achievement theory, which looks at 4 factors of personality and situational. For one, the motive to achieve success, or the motive to avoid failure. And that's a really, really important distinction, because high achievers, they tend to think about how to succeed, while low achievers tend to think about how not to fail. And that is not necessarily because they hate losing so much, which of course is also an important factor, but even more importantly, they hate being ashamed and looking stupid in front of other people. So if you're mostly focused on not failing, on not losing, if, for example, you're afraid to move up in stakes, if you're afraid to make a big bluff on the river and so on, ask yourself, is that because I'm afraid to look stupid in front of other people? Is it because I don't want to be ashamed of making that play or taking that shot if it fails? Do I avoid challenges? Do I avoid risky situations or even well-calculated risks? If that is the case, you can ask yourself, how can I focus more on the success? One example would be to ask yourself, what are the benefits of success, or what is the freedom I gain if I succeed? What are the resources I gain? What can I do with the money I win? What can I do if the shot goes well? What kind of freedom and possibilities and resources do I gain by focusing on or by being successful? So focusing on the positive outcome and what you gain through taking a risk, rather than focusing on the possibility of failing. So those are the personality factors. And then we have the situational factors, which are probability of success. If your chances of succeeding are 0, your motivation will be non-existent. And if your probability of failing is 0, you won't be very motivated either. You might do it anyway if there's absolutely no risk involved and there's something to be gained. You might take the chance, but you won't be very motivated to perform your best. So ideally, your probability of success in order to perform your best, at least for most people, is a 50-50 chance. If you have an opponent of equal skill, that is most likely to bring out your best performance. That's not always the case. For example, me personally, in poker, I prefer the easy games. Like I prefer to be quite sure of having an edge. And I know that's very different for some other people. I have a very good friend here in Vienna who's all about the competition. He loves battling racks on the highest stakes. He loves the competition. He loves having like a equally skilled opponent. On the other hand, if I do, for example, sparring in martial arts, I prefer to do it against somebody who's at exactly my skill level, because then it's much more fun, it's more challenging, it's more motivating for me. So that's a little bit of a personal preference, what your ideal level of challenge is. And especially in poker, that's maybe a slight difference compared to sports. In poker, it's not only about winning, it's also about money. So you might prefer the lower challenge, the lower skilled opponent, because that way you make more money. In sports, maybe for most people, it's more about comparing skills, about the competition, about a fair fight, basically. But that's another important thing to ask. Like, when do you perform best? Do you perform best if your opponents are slightly better than you? Do you perform best when they are slightly worse than you? Or do you perform best when they are exactly at the same skill level? Then, of course, we also have the incentive value of success. Like, what do you gain by winning? If, let's say, you gain nothing, you're playing for play money, your motivation, of course, will be very, very low as well. If you're playing for too much, if you're risking everything you own, you probably will be way too stressed out to perform your best. So again, ideally, you want to be in that middle zone where what you can gain is really valuable to you. It's something that improves your life or that you can be very proud of, but at the same time, you're not risking so much or you're gaining so little that your motivation suffers from it. And depending on these factors, you either develop this tendency to approach success, think about what do I gain by succeeding, rather compared to avoiding failure. And then either you are focused on the emotion of pride or shame. And that in turn will influence your behavior. You will either seek out challenges and seek out situations where you can gain something, where you can be proud afterwards, and it will improve your performance. On the other hand, if you're avoiding failure, you will probably take very few risks and avoid challenges and therefore perform poorly as well. And studies, again, have shown that high achievers, they have a high motivation to achieve success and a low motivation to avoid failure. And they enjoy evaluating their abilities and don't worry too much about what happens if they fail. And that's a very important thing in poker as well, of course. If you evaluate your abilities, you might either come to the conclusion, all right, here's a leak I have, here's a problem I have, here's a skill I don't have. And high achievers are more likely to be like, wow, cool, there's something I can learn. There's something new I can challenge myself with. There's something interesting to learn, and something I can be proud of after I've improved that or fixed that leak. While a low achiever is more likely to worry about, oh my God, I suck. Will I ever be able to fix this problem? What will people think of me if they see this leak in me? For example, poker players have this tendency of only posting hands where they look good, posting on their channels only the hands where they make the correct hero call or where they make a fancy play that turns that works in the end. And that can be a sign of being too worried about what people think of you. While high achievers, they don't care about that. They are absolutely fine with being criticized. They are absolutely fine with looking stupid, because these are the spots where you probably have the biggest leaks and where you can make the biggest improvement, where you can fix the biggest leak. That's of course the situations where you look the most stupid. So don't be afraid to post your losing hands and your punts and your bad plays. Yeah, we pretty much talked about that just now. Now here's an exercise for you. And Mikey, if you're still there, while people are typing out their answers, I would like to pose this question, those questions to you as well. So if you're still there, maybe you can join us for a minute. I would like to know, what is your combination of things that motivate you to perform well in poker, to improve in poker? And here's a few examples, but I would also like you, of course, to think outside of the box and to add more factors. One very good motivator to play poker is money, or more specifically, the things you can do with the money. For example, live in a nice house or travel around the world, support your family, and so on. Of course, fun is an important factor. In the beginning, for me, it was by far the most important factor. When I started out just playing with my friends for a few euros, fun was the most important factor. Excitement, competition, building relationships, building friendships, improving yourself. Poker can be a great tool for personal growth. It can be a great way to bring variety to your life or to your career. It can be a great source of feeling competent, as we talked about in the previous model. But also respect from others or fame can be motivators to play poker. So ask yourself, what are your own personal strongest motivators? And what could you do to improve those factors? Maybe, for example, fun is an important factor for you, but you're not having much fun at the moment. So this strong, important factor is not there at the moment. So you could ask yourself, what do I need to do in order to enjoy poker more again, and therefore gain motivation? How could you change your environment? What can you change internally, and what can you change externally to improve your motivation? And also, how can you motivate others? How can you motivate your peer group, your study group, in order to help them improve their motivation? So yeah, Mikey, if you...
Sure. So I guess mine is sort of like, I would say it's a combination of, it's definitely a combination of things. And the reason that I say that, or I know that to be true, is because when you had your list up there, so for me, money is probably the number one factor that got me started in poker. But over time, I think fun has sort of increased in terms of the thing that motivates me the most. And the reason I say that is because the game that I'm personally best at is 4-card PLO, and cash, and but it's probably one of the games that I have the least fun playing. So so if I'm given the choice to play that, or I can play a mixed game that has a number of different games that I find more interesting and just generally more fun, even though I'm not, hopefully I'm still making money in the mixed game, but even if I'm not, I tend to prefer playing those mixed games more than I do the game that I know that I'm best at, which means money isn't my sole motivation. So but that money kind of takes a back seat in that situation. And some of the other ones that you have listed are definitely, I've noticed that they have become more important to me over time. Since between when I started playing poker at 16, 17, 18, up through now, where I'm 37 now. So a lot of those things are more important to me. The competition, the fun, excitement, that kind of stuff, as opposed to just money.
Yeah. It was pretty similar for me. When I was in my early 20s, making easy money was motivation enough. It was awesome. Like I really enjoyed that. But of course, after years and years of grinding the same games again and again, it becomes a little bit boring and meaningless, and then you need more than that. Of course, and then that's why I put the use of money there as well. In order to motivate yourself long term, you really need to know, what do you want to do with the money? What does the money mean to you? Does it mean to you that you can live a bachelor's lifestyle and travel the world and jet set from one party to another and buy fancy stuff? Or does it mean supporting your family, I don't know, buying a house in Scandinavia or whatever, and living a stable, quiet family lifestyle? It's really important that you know what you want to do with the money. Otherwise, it's just you will get stressed out when you lose, but you won't enjoy winning as much because because the money has no meaning to you. So that's the way you use the money is really, really important. But also, of course, the fun factor, as I said, or as I see again and again, people tend to completely neglect that factor after a few years of playing professionally, because they feel like poker has to be this grind, or it's normal that it turns into a grind and there's no way around it. When in reality, actually, I would say having fun is a really, really important factor for long-term motivation, because otherwise at some point you will burn out. You can keep up this mindless grind for years. I've seen people do that for 10, for 15 years, but at some point you will burn out if you don't enjoy what you're doing. And of course, adding some variety to your game. For example, what I like to do is, I absolutely suck at tournaments, but every now and then I play a tournament because it's fun. Or my hourly at the casino is definitely way lower than when playing online, but from time to time I play online just because it adds a little bit variety and a little bit of fun. And sometimes I play with my friends who are like 10 times better than me, and where I'm probably the biggest fish at the table, but it's still fun to play with them. So yeah, be aware of what motivates you, and then ask yourself, what can you do to improve that? And I'm quickly gonna look at some of the examples that you guys gave. I see a lot of money, competition, improving skills, growth, feeling competent. Yeah, and only a few people actually mentioning fun. So yeah, now on to the second question, which is probably a little more difficult. What can you do to improve your motivation? What if, for example, the fun is missing? What could you do? Well, if right now, let's say the very next session you play, what could you do to improve your enjoyment of poker? Or what could you do to add a little bit of variety? I've just given a few examples, like trying out different formats, jumping into other games, playing just with people who you enjoy being around. Yeah, as I said, I sometimes play with people who are a lot better than me, but it's just fun playing with them, and I enjoy it even more if I do win a hand. So yeah, ask yourself, what is it you could do to improve your motivation right away? Yeah, traveling to new venues is great. The live circuit, for example, I like cities like Prague and Barcelona, while money-wise, it's not really the best thing for me to go and play there. It's a lot of fun. It's a way to visit an interesting city, meet new people, get some variety in your life, and so on. Yeah, seeking better competition, higher stakes. That's a great way to amp up the excitement in the competition, of course. Playing live if you're primarily an online player, or the other way around. Yeah, of course. Playing MTTs, live cash, and so on. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you guys seem to be aware of what to do. And yeah, hopefully this helps you a little bit. We will, of course, in future, in the following seminars and future videos as well, I will dive into a little bit more into a little more detail of how to do those things. But those are some great first ideas. Now let's talk about attribution. The way you or what you attribute your success to is also really important for how motivated you feel. So there's 6 categories of attribution with which you can describe your success. There's stability and stable and unstable factors. For example, you can attribute your success to either your skill level or to luck. Your skill level is, of course, stable and luck is unstable. And if you attribute your success to luck, you won't feel great about it. You won't feel very motivated the next time because you feel like it's not under my control. It's all up to the run of cards. So your motivation will be rather low. But if you say, it's my skill that determines the outcome, it's the skill that determines my success, you will feel confident and motivated to approach the next session. Then there's the locus of causality, internal or external. For example, an internal source would be your effort. If you're successful because of your effort, that will feel good, that you will feel confident, you will feel motivated. If on the other hand, you attribute it to an external factor, like a very soft field, everyone at the table is so bad that it's almost impossible to lose, that won't feel great for your confidence and you won't be as motivated. And lastly, there's the locus of control. Is it under your control or not? Is it, for example, your preparation? Is it your general approach to poker that determines your success? How you prepare, how much you study, what you do as a pre-game routine, what you do off the table? Is that the reason for your success? Or again, is it just luck? Or is it how good the games are? Is it whether a side is rigged or not? So are you in control of the situation or not? And of course, if you're in control, you will be more confident and more motivated compared to when you don't feel in control. And stable factors will increase your expectation of success, while unstable factors will decrease it. If the factor is internal, because it's, for example, of your effort, you will, of course, feel more pride or more shame if you fail. So it's a double-edged sword. If you feel like your effort is the reason for success, that will, of course, feel better if you fail, but it will also feel better if you succeed, but it will also feel, of course, worse if you fail. But then again, remember what I talked about earlier. If you fail, and you see it as a possibility to improve yourself, or you don't care that much about looking stupid or failing, then you will be able to cope with that. So yeah, ideally, you will feel like, or you will attribute your success to internal factors, but if you fail, it's not that much of a it's not that big a deal, because you know, well, I can fix it. I will feel good if I fix it. And failing or mistakes or looking stupid from time to time is part of success, or is something that is bound to happen on the way of success. If you attribute everything to an external cause, of course, this will decrease the pride or the shame, because, well, it's not up to you. It's not your fault, or not you didn't do anything in order to succeed. So you will be less emotionally attached to it. And of course, if you're feeling in control, if you think, if I prepare right, if I do the right thing to perform well, if I do the right things after the session, you will, of course, it will influence my result in a positive way. This will be increase your motivation. While if you feel like whatever you try, it's all for nothing, whether you give it your best or you don't try at all, it's all the same. This will, of course, decrease your motivation. This is closely related to two concepts that I talked about in my videos, which are self-efficacy and learned helplessness. Self-efficacy means you're in control of things. If you put in effort, if you expend time and energy, you will achieve a positive result. You can influence your life and your circumstances in a positive way if you try hard enough. And on the other hand, learned helplessness means having the feeling of whatever I try, it doesn't work. It doesn't change my situation. It doesn't improve my situation. So in order to improve your self-efficacy, you can always ask yourself, what is under my control? Which of these factors can I control? And that is, of course, not the run of the cards, but it is your preparation. It's how much you study. It's your game selection. It's the format you choose. It's the people you talk to. It's the people you work with together, and so on. So while the result in one hand in poker or one session is not under your control, there's many, many factors that are under your control, which will increase your self-efficacy and motivation. And then we have the ego versus task orientation, which is very important for motivation as well. And those are actually closely related to result or process orientation in poker. You will see the similarities in a second. So an ego-oriented goal is all about beating the other person, being better than the other guy, and not so much about whether you performed well or not. So if you're ego-oriented, you only care about beating the other person, or in the case of poker, winning money, and you don't care about how you get there. While task-oriented goal is making the right decision and improving your skill and enjoying and focusing on the process rather than the result. So those are pretty much the same concept. Ego-oriented goal would be results-oriented in poker. If you win a hand or if you win in a session, you feel good about yourself, regardless of whether you get lucky or not, or how poor the competition was. And if you're task-oriented, you care more about whether you made the right decisions and if you performed well in the moment, not so much about how you got, not so much about the result. And if you combine this with your perceived ability or competence, you will get certain achievement behaviors or simply ways you approach a challenge. If your perceived ability or competence can either be low, of course, or high. And you can either feel up to the task and have strong self-efficacy, or you can feel like this is overwhelming, this is too much for me, I'm not good enough. Low self-efficacy or learned helplessness, of course. And these combined, for example, if you are task-oriented and you have a high perceived ability, this is, of course, the optimal combination. You're focusing on the process rather than the result. You're focusing on performing the best, and you feel like your ability, your skill is high enough to tackle the challenge. On the other hand, if you're ego-oriented, you only care about the result, and you feel like you're not up to the task, your perceived ability is low. This is, of course, disastrous for your motivation. And this combination will result in, of course, how good your performance is, how much effort you put into something. Very importantly, how persistent you are, which is, of course, incredibly important in poker, because anybody who's played more than a few sessions of poker knows how extremely important persistence is. It will also influence your task choice, so meaning the level of challenge you set for yourself. What kind of games do you choose? Do you only choose the softest games where you don't improve your skill at all? Or do you challenge yourself as well? Do you play against opponents of similar or even higher skill? Or what people sometimes do as well, they self-sabotage by jumping into games or choosing challenges where they know it's pretty much impossible to win because the competition is so much better than they are, which makes it easy to find excuses. So if you choose an opponent who is much better than you, you feel like there's no need to try. Why should I even try if that person is so much better than me? And you have an easy excuse for failing. And that, of course, can be disastrous in sports, but as well as in poker. So if you jump in games which are too high, where you might have a little chance, but let's say you're on monster tilt and you feel like busting the rest of your bankroll, you're jumping into higher games and you're not even trying to succeed because or you feel like you have no chance of winning, so you don't even try. And there have actually been done quite a few studies on task and ego orientation. And to nobody's surprise, probably, task orientation leads to better work ethic because it's about improving your skill. It's about improving the process. It's about making the right decisions in the moment and not caring so much about the result. Of course, in sports as well as in poker, you can give it your very, very best, but sometimes your shots won't fall. Sometimes you don't hit the goal, or the goalkeeper has his very best day, and even though you bring your best performance, you still end up losing. And of course, that's the same in poker. Will be more persistent when you're task oriented, because task orientation, of course, gives you a high sense of control. If you're constantly working on your skill, you will get that positive feedback, not immediately, or at least not always immediately, but over time, you will get that feedback, okay? If you focus on the task, if you focus on your decision in the moment, you will get better results in the long run, which in turn leads to motivation to do even more of that. And then you realize, all right, it's not all up to luck. It's a lot about how much effort I put into. A lot of that is under my control, and therefore you will become more persistent as well, of course. And therefore, it also protects from frustration and disappointment, because if you're only reliant or only focused on the result, then your feeling of success or accomplishment is very much up to luck, especially in poker, of course. But if you're focused on improving and putting in the work, making the right decisions, you can feel a certain level of success and accomplishment and pride, even though you lost. Let's say you have a day where everything goes perfectly except for the results. So you wake up at the right time, you have a healthy breakfast, you have an awesome start to the day, you prepare well for the session, you make all the right plays and right decisions during the session, you take your time to cool down, you take some time off, enjoy the rest of the day with your friends or your family. Everything goes right except for the results. You end up losing during that session. Of course, you will feel much better about yourself if you're task-oriented rather than ego-oriented. So that way, if you develop more task orientation, you will, of course, it will be easier to feel good about yourself. On the other hand, ego orientation is much more swingy because, in poker especially, but in any other sports as well, you can bring your very best performance and you will still end up losing from time to time. Unfortunately, most people in most areas of life are more on the ego-oriented side, but that's not something that is set in stone. That is something that can be changed, and you can practice becoming more results-oriented. For example, by reviewing your day, only taking 5 minutes at the end of the day and asking yourself, what were the good decisions that I made today? Or what can I be proud of today? And that is especially difficult, but especially valuable on the days where things didn't go your way. Because on a losing day, let's say you have a really, really bad session, you won't feel like doing this exercise. You will feel like, distracting yourself, stuffing yourself with fast food and watching Netflix rather than doing this exercise. But especially on those days, it's really, really valuable to realize, all right, results didn't go my way today, but there was still a lot of things I had under control. A lot of situations where I made the right decision, which don't make me feel much better today, but in the long run, they will yield a positive results. Or maybe they will even make you feel at least a little bit better on that bad day. And of course, if you're ego-oriented, you're more likely to choose those way too easy or way too hard challenges. And you're much more likely to find excuses instead of asking yourself, all right, what can I learn from this mistake? Or what can I learn from this situation where I over-challenge myself? Maybe you realize, all right, I wasn't ready. So there's something I can change or improve. While somebody who's more ego-oriented will just say, well, it's the rigged card system. It's party poker. I always lose there. Or it's this one guy, he always runs hot against me. He always has it. So yeah, you're much more likely to find excuses, and you're much less likely to put in a strong effort if you're ego-oriented. So ask yourself, or actually, I'm going to again ask you guys in the chat, what can you do to improve your task orientation? What are simple, everyday steps? Let's not talk about like a big plan, but what are simple, everyday things you can do to improve your task orientation? One example would be if you're having a bad session, doing a hand review after the session and ask yourself, all right, did I really just run poorly, or did I make mistakes? What can I improve the next time I play these spots? So basically just doing a hand review after a bad session. That would be a good way to improve your task orientation. Setting micro goals, yeah, definitely, exactly. Not only looking at the big end goal, but looking at the small everyday steps. That's actually a really important part of being process oriented. Creating a schedule and a routine, exactly, because if you've established a good, healthy routine, you will pretty much automatically, or at least on most days, do a lot of things that are under your control, that are good for your performance, are good for your mood, are good for your quality of life. So you're taking control over a large part of your life and only leaving a smaller part of it up to luck. What can I learn today? Exactly. It's similar to doing this review at the end of the day. Studying before a session for warm-up is another way. Even if the session ends up going poorly, you've already done something positive. You've already done something that is under your control. Yeah, that's all good examples. Nice to see. So I quickly want to finish this up with the comparison of fixed versus growth mindset. Some of you may have heard this already. It's probably the most well-known concept out of positive psychology, which is concerned with what makes people happy and productive. And the fixed mindset basically means that you think that your talents and your skills are predetermined. They are genetically set in stone. You cannot change them. You're born that way, and there's nothing to be done about it. If you're in a fixed mindset, you're much more likely to set ego goals, while in a growth mindset, you have the opinion that talents and skill are only a starting point. Of course, life is not completely fair. We all have different circumstances. We have different genetics. We have different people surrounding us. So there is a certain starting point, but our talents and our skills can be developed throughout our whole life. And if you're in a growth mindset, you're of course much more likely to set task goals, because improvement and process orientation and making the right decisions is more important than the results. And actually, ironically, the less you focus on the result, the more you focus on the process, of course, the better your results will get. For one, because your decisions and your performance will be better, but also because you're not worrying so much, because you're in the moment. You're not thinking about, oh, what will happen if I fail, or you will not be busy criticizing yourself, or you will not be busy thinking about how unfair life is, that you haven't been born with this skill. Instead, you're focused on the performance. You're in the moment. You're not thinking about everything outside your task. You're 100% focused on the task, which of course will lead to better results in the long run. All right, so much for this theoretical part and for these basics of motivation. Now I want to give you a few minutes to just ask any question about today's topic, about motivation, but also about maybe the upcoming topics. I will quickly go back to the overview, or pretty much any question in general about the mental game. So yeah, feel free to ask pretty much anything. Will the recordings be available? Yes. This one will also be on YouTube, so available to everybody. The other 3 will only be available to the members, but they will be, you can rewatch them after the live sessions in the member section. How to measure progress in mental game? That's a really awesome question, because that's quite difficult. There's no, or not, there are metrics that you can use, but they are not as objective and not as clear. Actually, one thing you could do, you can actually create something, or there are tools to assess your progress, but they are not as precise as, for example, your tracking programs in poker are. But what you could do, for example, is using a diary where you track certain measures, like what was my mood on that day? From 0 to 10, how was my mood? What was my energy level like? What was my focus like? What were my decisions during poker sessions like? How much fun did I have during the poker session, and so on. So you can pretty much come up with your own measurement tool and track every day. You can just use a simple scale from 0 to 10, track that every day, and over a long period of time compare, has that improved? Of course, if you compare Monday to Tuesday, a lot of this will be variance. Of course, the weather, what you ate, and whether, I don't know, you had a fight with your partner or not, will massively influence those things in the short run. But if you track this over a long period of time, you will realize if there are improvements. Let's say your mood and your energy level go up 0.5% on average over a few months. Then you will have a clear metric of how your mental game improved. But also, which is probably more important, but also more difficult, is simply learning or relearning to listen to your body and to your mind, which is something that we very much unlearn during our life. We're constantly taught to only listen to the logical part of our brain. Our whole education system is about logic, only using your brain, neglecting what your body has to say. And that's a very important skill that you can relearn, for example, through mindfulness exercises or yoga or anything related to movement, body awareness, mindfulness, and so on. And that's actually, I would say, an even more powerful and even more important source of information. Being able to simply acknowledge and recognize, how do I feel? Do I feel good or do I feel bad? And if so, why is that? What causes me to feel good? What causes me to feel bad? For example, I, over the years, have become much more sensitive to realizing what kind of food is good for me and whatnot. For the longest time, I've been stuffing myself with crap, with fast food and Coca-Cola and so on. And I was sick all the time, but I didn't realize it was because of the nutrition. And it took me years to relearn that and actually really in detail listen to my body. If I eat this, how do I feel? If I drink that, how do I feel? And over years, I've developed a very strong sensitivity to what is good for me and what is not. The same, you can learn exactly the same in poker. For example, people tend to play way too many tables, not realizing how much the overstimulation is harming them and how how it keeps them up at night, how it impairs their performance, their sleep, their well-being, because they've simply unlearned to listen to their body. And if you're very sensitive to this, you might realize, all right, if I play 4 instead of 12 tables, I feel much better about myself. I perform better, I feel happier afterwards, I sleep better, and so on. So with pretty much anything that influences your mood and your performance and your quality of life, you can learn to become sensitive to it again. Can you give some tips on self-talk? or will this be covered in later seminars? That's a very general or broad topic, I would say. But yes, I will cover it in one of the upcoming videos. I cannot exactly say in which one, but it's too big of a topic to answer it now, but I promise it will be covered in one of the upcoming videos. How do I increase my ability to focus at the table? What training or exercise can I do? Very simple answer, meditation. Any form of focus meditation where you, as well as you can, focus on one thing, or open awareness meditation, so in a focus meditation, you practice focusing on one thing, for example, your breath, or a candle in front of you, or a point that you focus somewhere. And on the other hand, open awareness means being open to anything that happens, both inside of you and in the outside world, and also controlling your attention in a way that you can switch back between switch back and forth between both, which is exactly what you're doing in poker. Of course, in poker, sometimes you're very focused on one hand, but at the same time, you also have to switch back and forth between tables and not miss any vital information or big hand happening on the other table. So yeah, practicing this, focusing on one thing, being open to everything that is happening, and switching back and forth between both. Those are skills that can be trained with meditation. And of course, there's many, many other benefits to meditation as well. Can you give some examples of stability factors under the basic attribution categories? A stable thing would be, for example, your skill. Unstable would be your performance on one day, or the way you feel on one specific day. How well you perform on any given day is, of course, up to many random factors, like how well did you sleep, what is the weather like, what else is happening in your life. So this can be quite swingy, but your general skill level will be stable over time. Is it best to review what hands I played especially well for positive feedback, or just focus on what leaks I can improve after a game? I would say it depends on what mood you're in. If you feel like you've played terribly this session, you've made only mistakes, maybe focus a little more on finding things that you did right, because otherwise, yeah, you will feel just bad about yourself. But in general, I would say make it a mix of both. And develop a balanced view of yourself, because in a winning session, we tend to feel like we did everything right, we're awesome, we have no leaks, that there's nothing to review. And in a losing session, we will feel like we did everything wrong, we suck at poker, and we have to improve everything. So try to develop this balanced view of your skill and a realistic and honest assessment of your skill. And that, of course, requires you to look both for things you did well, but also for things you could still improve. Which is the point where you should focus more of your efforts towards strategy rather than mental game, assuming you have good basic skill? How often would you recommend coming back to mental game training? That's very difficult to answer in general. It's very, very subjective, I would say. That also comes back to assessing your skill and your leaks honestly. Maybe even getting some feedback from the outside, asking people, do you feel like I should work more on my mental game or more on my strategical game? For example, if you review a session with a coach, he can give you an external view on whether it was technical leaks that made you make a bad play, or whether you knew how to do it, you knew better, but a mental game issue caused you to make that mistake. That's something, yeah, you can review your own sessions, or you can do it with a coach or with a peer from your group, and then maybe get a better idea of whether you make mistakes because you don't know better or because of a mental game problem. About time session, in order to stay motivated, how long would you suggest to play per day or per week? Any specific sweet spot? That pretty much exactly comes down to this ability to listen to your body and listen to your mood and your energy level and so on. There's no any number I could tell you right now would be wrong, because it's 100% subjective. Some people perform very well playing 30, 40, 50 hours a week. Me personally, I would perform terrible if I played that much. For me, it's like 20 hours or 25 hours per week max. So that very much comes down to many, many different subjective personal factors, like is it your main profession? Do you have kids? Are you single, or do you have a partner? At what time of the day are your games good, and at what time are they running? What does your sleep schedule look like, or your ideal sleep schedule? So you can only identify this sweet spot yourself. And in order to do that, ask yourself, how much am I playing on average right now? How do I feel about it? If I rate my mood and my energy level over the whole week, would I give myself a good number or a bad number? And if it's good, you can ask yourself, all right, if I play 5 hours more next week, will I still feel the same? Or you can try it out in practice. And again, ask yourself after that week, all right, I played 5 hours more. Do I feel better, or do I feel the same, or do I feel worse? So you have to develop this skill for yourself. There's no way anybody can tell you how much to play. It might work for them. That absolutely doesn't mean it has to work for you. So yeah, there's no way around developing that competence and that ability to listen to your body pretty much. One of my biggest challenges is to remember all the poker theory, for example, the GTO sims. Do you have any tricks that have helped? First of all, don't try to be perfect. Don't try to remember everything, because this will stress you out. If you feel like you have to know everything, you have to know remember every spot, you will think about the fact that you don't remember all the spots while playing, instead of actually being focused on the play. So set realistic expectations, first of all, and don't overwhelm yourself. Set a learning pace where you actually process what you learn, where everything that you do is actually understood and remembered and saved in your brain. If you try to do too much at once, you will simply get overwhelmed and not remember any of it. So yeah, just set a healthy pace, and make sure having understood some stuff is better than not having understood a million different spots. And Phil Gelfand talked about this in, I think, in the Heads Up PLO series as well. Use shortcuts and use heuristics, use simplifications. You don't need to remember every single GTO solution. You just need to understand the principle behind that, and you can simplify things. If, let's say, a spot is, I don't know, 49% check, 49% bet, and 2% whatever, just split it 50-50. Don't try to fit in these 2%. Instead, simplify it and make your strategy a tiny bit less GTO, but way more applicable in real life, way more practical. The next seminar will be at the same time, same day, but this time, as I mentioned already, only for the Essential and Elite members. So if you like the seminar and you're not a member yet, now is a great time to sign up. And of course, if you are interested in my coaching, go ahead and visit my website. And of course, you can join the Discord channel to ask me questions there, and maybe generate some input for future videos as well. As I mentioned earlier, we will talk about this self-talk topic at some point in the future. If there's something you would like addressed in a video, if there's a question that I haven't answered yet, maybe I haven't seen every single question, put them in a Discord channel and I will address them at some point. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and hopefully see you next week.